I lost my dad days after I was born. So that meant that I learned about grief and loss at the same time that I was learning to walk, to talk, to socialize, to learn about the world. And so for me, grief and loss is very normal. I'm very comfortable with the idea of loss through death. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that not everyone is as comfortable around the idea of grief and loss as I am. This video is not about how to cope with the loss of a loved one. This video is mainly to point out the different types of losses that we experience in life. So what are these types of loss that I'm talking about? Well, there's developmental loss. This is something that is socially and culturally available to everyone. It's often described as a rite of passage, some form of maturing that happens, going from being a child and going through puberty. That's a developmental loss because you are now losing that child that you used to be, and you're now having to develop into this other person, this more mature, refined person. There's situational loss, which is often very sudden. This can be an accident, an illness, loss of employment. It's often a loss that requires for you to change your role. And so the loss and grief that you're experiencing here is having to let go of a role that you used to have, and now you're becoming this new role. There's anticipatory loss, and this often triggers an adaptive response. This is quite similar to actual loss. However, anticipatory loss causes some form of preparation through motivation or an increase in productivity. And a good example of this is if a company is laying off people, you are now anticipating a loss of employment. There's personal loss, and personal loss includes loss of eyesight, loss of hearing, loss of taste. You could lose a limb. Your health could deteriorate. Something that is personal to you. And then there's interpersonal loss. And I think this is the type of loss that we're almost familiar with. It can be through a breakup with a partner, a breakup with a friend. It could also include death of a loved one. And then there's material loss. This can be losing your job, losing your finances. You have to move schools, you have to move countries, having to move homes, or even becoming homeless. It's important that we become familiar with loss, especially the loss of a loved one, because it's inevitable. Death is always going to happen. We just need to become a lot more comfortable with it. So by describing this different type of losses that we experience in life, I'm hoping that we can draw conclusions as to how you cope with each type of loss and apply it to the loss of a loved one. There's no right or wrong way of dealing with the loss of a loved one. I just hope that this video helps you become a little bit more comfortable around the topic of loss and grief.